You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
Time to sharpen those swords. You're listening to Sabres Semantics, a hard-hitting interview and discussion show featuring players, alumni, media, and all others who have or still cover the NHL's Buffalo Sabres. With interesting stories from the past and current objective analysis, this show is sure to provide an entertaining and unique perspective for both Sabres and hockey fans alike.
Oh, brother, we are not worthy!
Exclusively on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Now, here's your host of Sabres Semantics, Brandon Caputo.
Welcome into another episode of Sabres Semantics right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, proudly brought to you by J&L Flooring. Brandon Caputo and Austin Brutter with you to break down the Sabres trade deadline moves, as you see on the video version of the thumbnail. Speaking of that, if you're enjoying the video version of the podcast and the content, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and smash that bell for all updates on video versions of our podcast and our small clips from our shows that do get released here on the network. And if you're listening to us today on your favorite audio platform on demand, thank you very much for doing that. Make sure to give us a follow at Sabres Semantics for all of our Sabres content. As well, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're posting reels and little short clips from all of our episodes on there as well, about a couple of key conversations that we have during the show, if you're into that sort of thing as well. So, like I said, we're going to discuss the Sabres trade deadline moves. We're also going to look at the upcoming schedule for the Sabres, as it is a very pivotal one if they do want to save their season here, that we'll get into in the second part of today's show. We'll also get our fan polls from what you guys thought of the last week or so and some things that have gone on, not just trade deadline, but maybe some coaching news as well, if you're maybe thinking if the Sabres are going to make a change in that department. But with that said, Austin, let's kind of start off here with what everybody's probably here to talk about by seeing the thumbnail, is our trade deadline thoughts for the Buffalo Sabres and what happened this past Friday, I guess Thursday, for the significant move. But obviously the big piece of news and the big talking point here is that the Sabres did move on from Casey Mittelstadt, as we discussed on our trade deadline preview show, as what the type of compensation that they would need to get, and Casey Mittelstadt being their best asset, as you mentioned on last week's show. They end up being able to move him, and they got a significant piece back in Bowen Byram, a defenseman that was a former 4th overall pick in this league.
Yeah, I mean, I think I ended the last episode by saying I don't expect him to get traded, so naturally he got traded. That is the type of trade that Adam said he was looking for if it was going to be a significant move for Mittelstadt, and it's a top 4 defenseman, nice hockey trade, talent for talent swap. I did, when the trade first was originally announced, I was excited. I like Bowen Byram. He's a very good player. I did think it was a little bit redundant given the style of defender that he is, and that Buffalo has, 2 of those style players in their top 4. But the more I thought about it, it's clear this is how Kevin Adams wants to construct his blue line. He went out. He says he wasn't shopping Mittelstadt, but clearly, when you have those conversations, it's not like, sure, you're not actively shopping it, but this type of player that you're looking for. So clearly Byram was someone that he identified. And I think you saw it in his first 2 games. He's a really good fit. There's, a little bit of risk in that. Mittelstadt has been playing really well for Buffalo. He was their leading scorer. Byram was having, I guess, quote unquote, a little bit of a down year in terms of his production and things like that. But, he's come in, maybe injuries were part of it, but he's come in, he's been on the penalty kill, the number 1 power play unit. He's playing on the top pair with Rasmus Dahlin, which it seems like that's where they wanted him to play the second they acquired him. Right? That's the trade Adam said he was going to make. He made it. I don't really understand. I can see why maybe some people were a little bit upset if they really wanted to keep Middlestat. But my whole thing and thinking was the whole time is people who wanted a change on this team, the only way to get that change was to move Middlestat. And now you see that. We have the top 4 defensemen that they were lacking. And now there's an opening for a key contributing forward. Whether that's Peyton Krebs stepping up or whether Kevin Adams goes out and gets that forward is what remains to be seen.
And as you mentioned, he was really the only significant player that they could move or, had the ability to move with his contract situation, obviously being an RFA this upcoming summer, and would I guess in his age range, there's a lot of players that they have locked up to long-term deals in that sense. And we mentioned that Buffalo's prospect pool is obviously very good as well, and they've got some guys in Rochester that we mentioned, and even in junior that are chomping at the bit to get up here on this team. So you're going to need to make room for some of those guys as well. If Adams doesn't want to move on from prospects, something had to give here. And although you're without Jack Quinn for the rest of the year, you're going to insert him back in there as well. Although Middlestat has moved up and down the lineup, been a versatile guy, as you mentioned, led the team in points no matter where he was slotted in the lineup. So it is going to be a hole and a void that they're going to have to address and fill. But if you're technically not looking at the rest of this year, even though they're still kind of in it at this point, I think it's a long-term move they had to make. And if a guy like Bowen Byram was available, because we know how highly touted defensemen are in this league, especially ones that are drafted so high like Byram was, and he's still only 22 years old, and they've locked up this very young decor for a long period of time. So you have to give up something to get something, and I think that's exactly what happened for both teams in this trade. I think it's a great trade for the Colorado Avalanche as well, getting Middlestat to come in there and really solidify that second line center that they've lost since trading away or since losing Nazem Kadri, and Ryan Johansson didn't work out there. So I think this is one of those hockey trades that I think, as you mentioned before, is something that's going to work out for both sides. And Sabres got a top 4D, which they wanted. Maybe not exactly the right shot that they wanted, but he fills that top 4 void if you don't really know where Yoki Haryu's going to sit on this. But I think it was a great trade for both sides, and it was probably the most significant trade of the whole trade deadline week, other than Jake Gensel going for a couple of minor prospects. But to me, that was a really solid hockey trade on both ends.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really nice hockey trade. It's the type of trade that you don't necessarily see all the time come trade deadline. It's the talent for talents. Yeah, it's the talent for talent swap. Like I said, I think the unfortunate thing is, like you said, mentioning Jack Quinn being out. I think Jack Quinn being out really does stink, because then at least you could see what the top 9 would look like with Krebs subbed in for Middlestat, because the top 9 would be healthy. Unfortunately, the Sabres don't get to see that, but that's not an excuse for the team's performance. It's more an excuse for, I wish we could see that just to get a proper evaluation of what this top 9 that they have in house kind of looks like here. That's beside the point. But yeah, it's like I said, Adams was pretty transparent that if the right trade was there, talent for talent, now for now, he was going to make the swap. And he did. I will give Adams credit for that. He does seem to stick to his guns and at least do what he says, whether it's exactly how you want it or not. The year that they signed Comrie and Lyubushkin, he's like, we're going to get a goalie, we're going to get a rugged defensive defenseman. They did. Now, did those work out? No. Last offseason, he said he's going to shore up the defense. He signed Clifton and Eric Johnson. Did it work out? Not necessarily. But he's kind of stuck to his guns, which I guess he deserves some credit for that. But now it's on him. He did say, at his trade deadline press conference, he tried to add a veteran center and it didn't happen. And I kind of said, I was like, that's good. I'm glad he did identify that as a need. But the second you admit that you tried to get it and it didn't happen, that means there's no excuse to not get it done in the offseason. So, like I said, he opened up that spot in their forward group. It's now on him to go out and get it, or hope that over these next, the rest of the seasons, Peyton Krebs really shows what he can do. I do think that Krebs is a third line center. I think he can flourish in that role. I know, people don't necessarily agree. I think most people are happy to see him, hopefully, that he gets another chance. I know on paper he's on the third line. Granato's not really playing him as a third line center. He's still playing a very minimal amount, but that's beside the point. So it's evaluation time for that role. But as we're going to talk about later in the show, it's not really evaluation point for this season, because somehow, some way, this season could be very, very interesting if the results go the Sabres' way this week.
And as you mentioned, with that hole with Middlestat there, and you mentioned Krebs wanting to take a bigger step there, and we've seen flashes that he could if Granato gave him the adequate playing time. And like you mentioned, that's another discussion for another day. But when you have a hole like that in the forward group, obviously the defense looks a lot better. Like, do you see how how it makes them better for the short term? I know it's more of a long term play. It makes them better on the back end, but if you're trying to really make a playoff push, as they're trying to say that they're still doing at the moment, when you take out a guy like Casey Middlestat and you don't bring in another forward, you lose Kyle Opozo as well, which we'll get into. Like, your forward group got worse, so unless there was a shining star in Rochester that you were going to come up and you knew that was going to make an impact right away, why wouldn't they at least try to go out and get a veteran guy to kind of fill that spot for the rest of the year, even if it was a rental where they gave up a late round pick or something like that? Or I know Adams also said that there were some options about bringing in veterans, but then you move out Opozo, so what was the sense in that? And didn't want to kind of ruin the team dynamic and the leadership, I guess, structure within that room. So I don't even know where he wanted to go with that.
Yeah, so I'll answer your question in two different parts. I think one, how do they get better now? Well, you get better now by your defense is now very stacked. You can now play your top four, even top six, really, because like Jacob Bryson is playing really well in his minutes that he's playing. Clifton is a little bit still inconsistent, but I think he's a lot better than he was earlier in the year. Yoki Haru is still playing well. You now have taken a lot of the load off Dahlin and Power's shoulders, giving them another guy to run with in the top four. With that run where Dahlin was playing 29 plus minutes doesn't need to happen anymore because you can throw Byram out there on the power play, which we've seen him and Dahlin together. You could throw Byram out there on the penalty kill, which we have seen so far. The other part is, yeah, Adams did make the forward group weaker, but I will say he did mention that he wanted to acquire a veteran center. It just didn't happen. So at least he recognizes that it happened. I think short term, you're better because now, and we've seen it, your offense is going to start to become from your defense, and then in hopes that throughout the rest of the year, your big guys start scoring somewhat close to what we've expected to. We've seen Bryson, Byram, Dahlin, Power. Those guys have been scoring and driving offense the last little while. Tage finally got on the board with a power play goal. If those big guys continue to, they're not going to get back to the level that they were at last year. I just don't think that's possible. I think there's some health things that are going on that we don't necessarily know about, but if they can kind of get back to a somewhat respectable level with the defense still producing, in their minds, that will make the team better in the short term. And then you still have Luukkonen, who's playing extremely well. So I think that is their plan for the short term. Long term, let's see what Krebs can do in this third line role. If he's the real guy, that's good. If not, we know we have to go out and still acquire that veteran center. So I think I don't mind the long term and short term, outlooks there. But yeah, there was no doubt trading Middlestat was going to make your forward group weaker. I mean, unfortunately, Byram's debut, that Nashville game, the second Tage was out of that game, everyone kind of knew, okay, this is going to be a disaster because this team is not built to be without their top center and Middlestat, who was their third line center. So at least when Krebs is in the lineup, they can go Tage, Cousins, Krebs is their top three. When Tage isn't an option, you're kind of screwed.
And before we get into the other trades, a couple of other transactions that have happened. Ryan Johnson was sent back to Rochester, and we heard Kevin Adams talk about he wants to give him big-time minutes in Rochester as they're still kind of, trying to battle down there. He's going to play top pair down there in Rochester. I know you've really liked what we've seen from Ryan Johnson so far this year in the limited role that he's been given as the kind of the extra defenseman that gets into the lineup here and there. But I think we've got a good showcase of what Ryan Johnson's going to be in the future, and hopefully he's a part of this long-term plan on this decor. Although when you acquire a guy like Bowen Byram and you don't know what their deal is with Henry Jokiharju yet, you wonder if Ryan Johnson might be a piece to, unfortunately that they might try to, dangle out there if it is able to get them a forward, but we can get into that later. And then the other thing was Victor Olofsson getting in the lineup on a full-time basis. We heard Adams say that he tried to move Olofsson, but it just didn't work, and they put him out there, and he scored. So, I mean, he got that goal against the Leafs. So he got in the lineup, and we know that Victor Olofsson's a goal scorer, and that's basically the only thing that he does to, I guess, contribute to the team. And we know that he's kind of been a good soldier in that sense of just showing up, and we know he kind of wanted out, and they were going to try to move him. It never really happened. And he's been the extra forward all year, so he's got into the lineup on a full-time basis as well. So I guess quick thoughts on Ryan Johnson being sent down and Victor Olofsson now being a full-time forward on this team.
Yeah, so Johnson, I think it's right? Like, it makes sense now, right? I still think he is a top six. Again, we'll get into that in future episodes. I think Yoki Haru is actually the odd man out in the defense, not Ryan Johnson. But again, that's for a future discussion. Right now, Yoki Haru is playing extremely well. Jacob Bryson has really stepped up, and that has kind of made, in the short term, Ryan Johnson not expendable, but that's why he's going to go down to Rochester now, because that's where he's going to play. Rochester's in a playoff push. They could use some help. They got the Cali, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Jalen, whatever his name is, in the Oposo return. He's down in Rochester now. So I think realistically the play of Jacob Bryson made it so that Johnson can go down and be the number one, perhaps number two in Rochester instead of the number 7 up here, which is fine. Olsen, it is what it is. They've been trying to move him for a while. I think that's been pretty much out there if you've followed along any reports whatsoever. Couldn't get done. It is what it is. We still know he's got a nice shot. This is his chance to showcase for the rest of the league. Hey, like, his contract, he's due up a contract in the summer. Use these next 18 games to show that you're worth it. So hopefully he's a motivated player who at least produces some results for the betterment of the team and for, honestly, his long-term future, because we know he's not playing in Buffalo anymore. So it's his job on the line now.
And, I mean, you look at the cap-friendly situation now, and they bring in a guy like Byram, and he's got one more year left before he becomes an RFA. So maybe that takes a little bit of pressure off them this summer to be able to make those other decisions with the other key players that they have coming off the books, and maybe they extend Byram this summer instead of letting that drag out, kind of like the Middlestat situation going into his RFA contract coming to an end. Then the trade speculation starts to happen if the Sabres move on from him, if they don't get him re-signed. So maybe that's, like you said, something we can talk about in the summertime if they plan on re-upping Bowen Byram, which I assume that's what the plan is here, if you trade away a guy like Casey Middlestat. But we'll move into the other trades here, Austin, real quick, and we'll get into the poll, I guess, later. But as far as the other trades, they made four trades total. So going off our last poll, it was 3 plus, 2 or 3, 0 or 1. So I guess they technically went over the four trades, even though the one was a Rochester player. So I don't even know if you want to count that one or not. But it was a trade. So the Sabres, obviously, as we mentioned, moved Casey Middlestat to Colorado for Bowen Byram, which was the most significant trade of the week for Kevin Adams. Then they went out and traded their captain, Kyle Oposo, to the Florida Panthers, obviously a pending UFA, and a guy that they really just wanted to do a solid in letting him choose the team that he wanted to go to really try to make a cup push and maybe his final season in the National Hockey League and finally getting in the playoffs for the first time in 7 years. As you mentioned, they got a minor league prospect back and a 7th-round pick for Oposo that could become a 5th if the Florida Panthers do win the Stanley Cup, Austin. We talked about this on our trade deadline preview. Were they going to move on from the captain, Kyle Oposo, if it made sense for him? And obviously, he must have wanted to go to a contender to really have a shot here, and Kevin Adams was able to make that happen for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think as the last couple games started to approach the deadline, you kind of heard some reports come out. Oposo kind of said, like, oh, like, Adams knows where I stand. I feel like it got to the point where if he was going to stay, he kind of would have just outright said he doesn't want to leave. Again, whether people agree or not, I think Oposo is the type of guy where if he wanted to stay, you do right by him and let him stay. Like, they could have moved Girgensons instead if Oposo wanted to stay, which obviously, actually, I don't think they would have, because I don't think there's anything in this world that'll make Terry Pegula move Zemgus Girgensons. But like I said, Oposo is the guy that he was going to go to a legitimate cup contender like Florida, right? Like, they're firmly in the playoff race, one of the best teams in the league. They were in the cup last year. Like, makes sense. Reunites with Sam Reinhart, a former teammate, even Evan Rodriguez, a former teammate. So I think it's a really good spot for him. Not exactly sure what his role is going to be. If that 5th-round pick does come to fruition because they hit the cup, that's a great bonus. But if not, I think that was just more or less Kevin Adams doing right by a veteran, and whether people still, think that's a crazy opinion or something that the GM shouldn't do. Look at the reaction when that trade happened. Most Buffalo media and Buffalo fans said, good on Adams for doing right by his captain and letting him go chase a cup. Like, it's silly, but that stuff does matter. So the return was never going to be big. I was actually a little bit surprised they got an AHL body out of it, plus the 7th-round pick. So, Rochester needed help. Adams got Rochester some help, plus a potential 5th-round pick. At worst, you have a 7th-round pick.
And this is the stuff that matters that people don't really talk about as far as good culture and treating your players right. I mean, all this stuff matters when these players hit free agency or when no move clauses kick in. Like players respect what other players' opinions are of places that they've been at, and whether we like to hear it or not, they do talk about places and ask other former players that have played in certain areas, how did they treat you there? And it does matter to people. So if people want to just kind of shove that under the rug and think that it doesn't matter, then you don't understand that these are people at the same time and they want to be treated with respect, although, they are, assets at the end of the day, as dark as that might seem. There are people as well, and I think doing right by your captain that's been through so much, as you mentioned on our trade deadline preview show, all the things that he's done here with Buffalo and all the trials and tribulations he's gone through with this team, being able to help him out on the way out and get him somewhere that he has a chance. Like, I was completely okay with that move. I was like you. I didn't even care what the compensation was. Just get him a chance and maybe give an opportunity to somebody in Rochester to be able to come up and take his spot. But more importantly, have somebody in that room step up as hopefully the next captain of this team, whether that's going to be Tuck, Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin. We're not really sure yet, but somebody's going to step up in that room, and Opposo even said that the guys are ready in there to take over the C from him on his way out.
Yeah, that's basically all this was about. It was about opening up a spot, moving on from a guy who, whatever your opinion of him was, sure, he did not live up to the hype of the contract that he signed back, when he became a free agent and signed with Buffalo. But over the last couple of years, he stepped up, was a nice veteran leader, really good guy. It genuinely seems like he's honestly a really good person, which makes it a lot easier for him and a lot easier to do right by him. And now, Tyson Jost, Lucas Rusek are up here. Maybe one of them can, have a nice little 15 game audition, 15, 20 game audition, whatever they're going to get out of this. And it is what it is. But at the end of the day, you cleared out a spot. You did right by your former captain. And again, it was an inconsequential move in my mind, but it also was such an easy, good PR move for Kevin Adams to do right by one of the popular teammates in the organization.
Absolutely. So we'll move on from that trade to a trade that I was kind of shocked by, not for the fact that the player was traded, but for the fact that the Sabres were able to get a 4th-round pick for Erik Johnson from the Philadelphia Flyers, and it's kind of been like a triangle there of trades with Colorado, Philadelphia, and Buffalo, if you really think about it. They kind of made some swaps there on the defensive side, and the Flyers moved out Sean Walker to the Colorado Avalanche for a 1st-round pick, and then they decided to bring in a veteran right-shot defenseman like Erik Johnson that should fit John Tortorella's system quite well there, even though he isn't quite the same player that we definitely saw here in Buffalo this year that he was previously with the Colorado Avalanche. But the fact that the Sabres were able to get a 4th-round pick, I think it's good housekeeping by Kevin Adams. Get rid of a pending UFA that really didn't have a long-term plan here. Just didn't work out for Erik Johnson this year in Buffalo, signing that one-year deal. See you later, get a 4th-round pick, and give somebody else an opportunity here like Jacob Bryson or whoever else to really step into a top 6 role.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, a 4th-round pick is pretty solid considering, Johnson didn't have the greatest performance this year. And I think Johnson would be the first one to admit that. Obviously, he had different intentions when he signed with Buffalo. But yeah, right-shot defensemen are still valued heavily in this league, especially ones with Stanley Cup pedigree, which Johnson has. Nice little bit of tidy work there by Adams. Maybe they could have got a little bit more if they retained, but at the end of the day, I don't know, who cares? That's my opinion. You said opened up a spot, which didn't really, I guess, need opening because Johnson hasn't really played in a while. But yeah, it was pretty much the worst kept secret that Johnson was getting moved. Like, the second the Sabres were kind of not guaranteed to be in this playoff race, it seemed pretty obvious that he would be the first one to go. I think if you ask anyone, the 2 guys that they thought would go would be Opposo and Johnson, and that's exactly what we saw.
Yeah, I mean, Johnson was held out of the last 2 games before the deadline, so if that doesn't tell you that the guy's getting traded, then I don't know what you're going to think with that. But yeah, just solid move there. Wish Johnson the best with Tortorella there in Philly, and maybe you can get another playoff run there if they are able to keep it up there. But yeah, just solid housekeeping by Kevin Adams, and I'm ecstatic with the 4th-round pick return for Erik Johnson. And the last move, which we don't even really have to discuss much because it was really an AHL move, was Devin Cooley getting moved to the San Jose Sharks for a 2025 7th-round pick. Sharks needed some depth at their goaltending position with acquiring Vanacek, who is injured for the rest of the season, and moving out Kaapo Kähkönen. So they just needed a guy to fill out their the Barracudas goaltending situation. So again, gives them another guy, and Devin Cooley, all the power to him, but he was going to be at most a Rochester backup. So I'm okay with them just kind of moving that contract out, and just a 7th-round pick for a depth goaltender.
Yeah, I think maybe if Devin Levi wasn't down in Rochester, there might be argument that Cooley could be an AHL starter. But again, anything to kind of clear the way and let Devin Levi be the de facto guaranteed number 1 down there, which he was going to be no matter what, whether Cooley is down in Rochester or not. It was always going to be Levi's job. So I think it's just they had a lot of goalie depth in the organization, and by depth I just mean they had a sheer number of bodies in terms of goalies. So moving out Cooley, and now you have Tokarski and Levi as your tandem down there. Nice, not tidy bit of housekeeping, but it's good now that you have 2 goalies in the AHL, 2 goalies in the NHL. There's no 3 goalie rotation on any of the 2 pro teams in the organization. The asset at the end of the day doesn't really mean anything. And good on Cooley, who probably gets a chance to go play a little bit more. And he's already backed up in the NHL. Maybe San Jose gives him an NHL start, and the kid gets to live out a dream, being local guy down there and getting to play for the Sharks.
As somebody who follows the Sharks, they could use any help they can get. So all the power to Devin Cooley down there in San Jose. See if he gets an opportunity. Lastly, before we hit the break, Austin, 2 moves that I guess didn't happen that we discussed on our trade deadline preview. One was getting that veteran backup goaltender that I had kind of hinted at. Maybe they were looking at. They ended up sticking with Eric Comrie as the backup. They don't make a move for a veteran goaltender. And then obviously, as you kind of mentioned there during our kind of trade recap, is Zemgus Girgensons remains a Buffalo Sabre and continues to gain the hearts of the Pegula family and even Kevin Adams. They say that they were happy that they didn't move on from Zemgus Girgensons, that he's still here. So he was the lasting pending UFA that didn't get moved, and he's the last man standing, still the longest tenured Buffalo Sabre. So I'll kind of give you final thoughts on not getting a veteran goaltender and Zemgus Girgensons continuing his Ironman streak here with the Sabres.
Yeah, veteran goaltender. I wasn't really even considering that necessarily. I think they are happy with the schedule. Not a lot of back-to-backs. I think they're happy to just run out Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and he's playing well. There's no reason to not do that. Girgensons, I honestly, yeah, I think there was a market for him. Obviously, I had no idea, but he's the type of player that just seems like the trade deadline bottom 6 rental forward that teams acquire. I mean, look at it. Patrick Maroon was traded. Girgensons can skate better than Patrick Maroon. I think Girgensons would have fit really well in the bottom 6 of a bona fide playoff contender, but as reports have been out there, the ownership loves him. Adams said he's not. He even has had conversations about potentially bringing him back. If he does come back, will I be upset? Not necessarily. No, he's a 4th-line player. He is what he is. But to me, that was one that I was like, okay, if the trade was there, why didn't you make it? But there's always one guy that the ownership just loves and doesn't want to get rid of. I think, I heard Jeff Merrick on 32 Thoughts saying, that's how Columbus feels about Boone Jenner. It's how Pegula feels about Zemgus Girgensons. Those are the guys that just ownership just loves and they don't necessarily want to get rid of. And I think that's what happened here. And, he's a 4th-liner. He's been the longest tenured Sabre. He is a pending UFA. So, if there is interest in a reunion, Girgensons has to actually want to stay here as well, which maybe he does. He's been here since, he was an 18-year-old kid. So we'll see. Like I said, that was a guy that I kind of wish would have gotten moved just for the sheer change of a name. But it is what it is at the end of the day. I'm not livid that he's here.
So trade deadline recap for the Sabres, A, B, C, or D, Austin. Where are you with your, I guess, grade for what Kevin Adams was able to do on this deadline?
I would say a solid B. I love the Middlestat trade. It's a big swing, but much needed swing. And then the rentals, I think he did a relatively good job. There's no reason to complain about any of the returns that you got there. The only reason I can't give it any higher is because, I don't think the pieces that Middlestat aside, I don't think the pieces that we had were all that appealing. So it's kind of hard for him to hit a home run. But I think he did pretty well. Obviously, the swing for Bowen Byram is the big piece here, and the reason why I think he had a pretty solid trade deadline, because maybe people did expect the move. Again, I was of the opinion that Middlestat was going to be moved. I just didn't expect to happen at the deadline because it just doesn't usually happen. So that was a nice, pleasant surprise for me.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a B as well, just for the fact that they didn't move out Zemgus Girgensons, which I'm with you. I think they should have just done it to do him a solid as well, and just to get a new, fresh face in here. And as well, just not being able to fill that forward spot with moving out Casey Middlestat. I know we talked about Adams wanting to make a move, and it just wasn't possible. So I'm with you. I think they had a solid deadline. That big home run deal with Middlestat for Byram was good, and they did good by Eric Johnson and Kyle Opozo being able to move them out for any assets to give more opportunity to some of the other players on the roster, and for them to get another playoff run. So I'm with you on, they did a solid job. I can't really be too upset with what they were able to do.
Yeah, no, there's no reason to be mad with what they did. If you wanted a little bit more, that's cool. That's fine. Like, I think we all maybe wanted a little bit more, but at the end of the day, you made a nice hockey trade. You moved out 2 UFAs. Really, I think that's kind of what everyone's expectation was.
Right. So we're going to take a break on today's show. We're going to get more in our second segment today, going over the fan polls as well as looking ahead to a very important schedule for the Sabres this next week or so if they want to remain in the playoff hunt here in the middle of March. So stay right here. I'll be right back on Sabres Semantics right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, proudly brought to you by J&O Flooring.
Last year, more homes canceled cable TV than ever before. Why? It's just too expensive. For half the price of cable, you can get Fubo TV and watch the live sports and TV you love. Try free at FuboTV.com.
J&L Flooring is Niagara's specialty flooring and design company. They take great pride and provide elite customer service and support. With a beautiful showroom, great pricing, and a wide variety of truly unique products, J&L Flooring is your specialty flooring and decor boutique shop. All of their products are environmentally friendly and responsibly produced so you can feel good about your flooring choices. Their goal is to build authentic relationships based on honesty and integrity that they foster with respect and authenticity. Offering a unique and wide range of quality products presented by a knowledgeable and patient team, they simplify the process to make your life easier and to make your home more beautiful. Visit them at 4424 Montrose Road in Niagara Falls or find out more at jnlflooring.com. If you think you can get a better deal anywhere else, you don't know Jack at J&L Flooring.
Niagara Golf Lounge features 2 state-of-the-art indoor golf simulators, allowing you to play some of the world's best courses all year round. The perfect place to indulge all season long. Don't worry about getting thirsty while you play around with your friends. Their fully stocked bar offers a wide selection of drinks, appetizers, and a variety of meals are also available to enjoy before, during, or after you play. Grab a seat next to the fire in their comfortable sports lounge. Didn't bring your clubs? No problem. They have partnered with TaylorMade to offer you the best rental clubs. You won't want to miss their exclusive NFL and NHL giveaways for the Buffalo Sabres and Buffalo Bills. Located in the Best Western Plus Cairncroft Hotel, 6400 Lundy's Lane in Niagara Falls. Visit NiagaraGolfVacations.com to learn more and to reserve your golf bay today. The Niagara Golf Lounge, Niagara's home for golf and sport all year round.
Wild Bill's Auto Repair is your local center for auto maintenance and repair in the Niagara region. Since 2012, Wild Bill's Auto Repair and Body Shop has been helping customers stay safe and confident on the road, knowing their vehicles in top running condition through their services. Located at 7868 Oakwood Drive in Niagara Falls, the garage started as a tribute to the owner's father, William Robert Hunter, who passed away, continuing the same community spirit and high level of service which customers came to expect from him back at Hunter's Auto Repair. Their multi-award-winning auto shop has earned the trust of the Niagara community with its fair treatment of all customers who can feel confident they'll get the trustworthy advice and repairs during their visit. Their experienced crew loves meeting new people and looks forward to forming a lasting partnership for the care of your cars. To find out more or to book service, contact them today. 905-358-7868 or wildbillsauto.ca. Wild Bill's Auto Repair, helping customers stay safe and confident on the road since 2012. Pets bring immense joy to our homes, becoming an integral part of our families. But this living, loving experience often requires a little extra care and attention. That's where Global Pet Foods comes in, with owners and staff ready to support you every step of the way. Check out one of their locations today. 3643 Portage Road in Niagara Falls, 160 Highway 20 in Font Hill, or 400 Scott Street and 344 Glendale Avenue in St. Catharines. Global Pet Foods, where pets are undeniably part of the family. Proud to sponsor the Dog Pound Podcast, the official podcast of the Niagara Ice Dogs. Are you looking to hire? Let the Niagara Employment Help Center save you valuable time and money by making your hiring process easier. Their services include free job postings in-house and on their website, fill job vacancies quickly and efficiently, access to a bank of potential employees, reduce employment costs, and financial incentives may be available to offset the cost of new hire training. Check out the website at ehc.on.ca or call 905-358-0021 for more information. The Niagara Employment Help Center, helping people find work since 1983.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
Hey, hey, here we go, it's hockey night in Buffalo. Hey, hey, here we go, the boys in blue, white, and gold. Hey, hey, here we go, make some noise, get in the zone. All for one and one for all, let's hear you from your heart and soul. And we will stand raising our hands, saying, let's go Buffalo, let's go Buffalo. We will be here till the end, saying, let's go Buffalo, let's go Buffalo.
Welcome back to part 2 of today's Sabres Semantics episode. Brandon Caputo and Austin Broder back with you. Basically going over the Sabres trade deadline moves in our first segment today, and in the second part of today's episode, we're going to go over the Twitter polls real quick from what you fans thought out there of the Sabres deadline and about a possible coaching change. As well, we'll preview the upcoming games for the Sabres, including tonight against the Detroit Red Wings, because it is a very important stretch to save their season if they really want to get back in this thing, and they have a possibility in doing so. So, guys, before we get going here, one of our great sponsors, the Niagara Employment Help Center, is hosting a job fair on Tuesday, April 9th at the Americana Water Park and Resort on Lundy's Lane in Niagara Falls. It's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., so it's casual business attire. So if you're looking for all different types of work in the Niagara region, make sure to go and check out that job fair, on-the-job interviews, drop off your resume, all that good stuff from our friends over at the Niagara Employment Help Center, hosting the job fair again Tuesday, April 9th at the Americana Water Park Resort and Spa. So, Austin, let's look at the Twitter polls out there, and guys, make sure if you want to get in on the polls for our shows every single week here, follow us at Sabres Semantics, and we post polls for all of our shows if you want to have your opinion heard on the show. So our first poll today, and this was posted a couple days before the trade deadline because it was significant enough news that I said, you know what, let me throw a poll up here and we'll kind of discuss this real quick. I knew it would get some hits, and it definitely did because it's talking about an old face. So after Lindy Ruff was fired as the New Jersey Devils head coach, would you want the Buffalo Sabres to entertain the idea of bringing Lindy Ruff back as their head coach? Heck yes, heck no, indifferent, and Granado's till a season's end were the four options. Heck yes won this poll at 56.1%. Heck no was second at 19.5%. And again, Don Granado is still the head coach of this team, so I'm not trying to put any motives or push any motives in that sense. But if they were to make a coaching change, Austin, and decided that Don Granado's voice needed to be something different and they needed a fresh look come the offseason, would you entertain the reunion of Lindy Ruff coming back to the team that he coached for so long and took the last team that the Sabres went to the playoffs with? Lindy Ruff was the head coach.
Would I entertain it? Yeah. I mean, I would be up for any candidate that would come in and, like, it's very hard to talk about because, like, Lindy Ruff is nostalgic, so obviously trying to remove that part of it. If Lindy Ruff has quality goaltending this year in New Jersey, is he fired? Probably not.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's kind of where I fall in here. So, like, I still think he is a good coach. I still think maybe his style, he's shown that he can evolve a little bit, right? He's had success in Dallas. He's had success in New Jersey. So it seems like he can evolve his coaching style with the times. So, yeah, I wouldn't be against it? Would he be at the top of my list? Not even close. But would I totally be like, what the heck? Why are they bringing back Lindy Ruff? No, I would definitely entertain the idea of him potentially being a head coach.
Absolutely. I'm in that boat too. I think that maybe, like you said, if New Jersey would have got average goaltending this year, he would still be the coach of that team, because we saw what they did last year, and we saw that they were really a team that everybody was high on going into the season, of a team that was going to be a real contender, and it just didn't work out. Jack Hughes started off hot, then got hurt. Timo Meier really, had a disappointing second year with the New Jersey Devils, kind of picking it up since the coaching change, oddly enough, but a lot of their big guys just underperformed, and I think, like most coaching changes, you can't change all the players, and it's just the easiest thing to just change the coach. And I think that's kind of what happened with Lindy Ruff in New Jersey, and I wish him all the best. And if they're able to bring him on, maybe as an assistant coach, I don't know if that's kind of his cup of tea at this point in his coaching career. I know he's done it with the New York Rangers, but I'd be okay with seeing Lindy Ruff back. And if they were to move on from Don Granato, I'd be okay with it. I'm sure there's other candidates, like you said, are out there that are better, but the nostalgic factor for Sabres fans is that Lindy Ruff means a lot to everybody within the organization and people who have grown up following this team. So I'd be okay with it as well, as long as he can continue to evolve his coaching style in 2024. So our second poll is, other than Bowen Byram for Casey Middlestat, which move at the trade deadline did you like best for the Sabres? We talked about the 4 trades there in the end of our first segment today. Eric Johnson for a fourth, to no surprise in my opinion, took this poll with 76.2%, and actually none of the above was second with 19. Some people just felt indifferent about the 3 minor trades that the Sabres were able to make, other than the Bowen Byram Casey Middlestat trade. Austin, not much to say there.
Yeah, no, I mean, pretty self-explanatory. I think none of the above is kind of wild, because, like, I don't know, it's kind of hard to hate the Eric Johnson trade. You got a 4th-round pick for a guy who wasn't going to play all that much for the rest of the year anyway. But yeah, there's not a whole lot to get into there. Clearly, to me, that was the other best quote-unquote move.
And then lastly, thoughts on the Sabres' acquisition of defenseman Bowen Byram in exchange for forward Casey Middlestat. I posted this right as the trade happened, so it got a lot of hits on this poll, and a lot of people were engaging on it. So it was either love it, hate it, good for both sides, or indifferent. And good for both sides won with 40.5%. And then, it was love it was 31%. So it seems like the consensus from the poll is that people thought it was a really good trade on both ends, and I don't think you can argue any part of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, my timeline was a little bit different. My timeline was a little bit more skeptical of the trade, so it's kind of nice to hear that most people weren't super emotional about it, which, yeah, I mean, what's that saying? If everyone's happy, but both sides are also a little bit skeptical, it usually means it's a pretty dang good trade, and I think at the end of the day, this is a pretty good trade. Both teams got a good young player that filled the position of need. Both teams gave up a good young player at a position of need as well, so, like, again, classic hockey trade. I think long-term, both teams are going to be relatively happy with how this one works out. Lastly,
before we move on from that, Casey Middlestat's kind of comments coming to Colorado, did you have any problems with what he said about, the types of practices they've had and seeing a building full, something along those lines? Do you think that those were jabs, or do you think that he really just, was speaking his mind and wasn't really trying to take shots at Buffalo? Or I don't know. How did you kind of feel about what he said there at practice?
Yeah, I don't think he was taking any shots at Buffalo. At least I definitely don't think he was taking shots at the fans. Whether it was a shot at the former coaching, like the Sabres coaching staff or not, the morning skate comment was interesting and stood out to me because, again, I don't think there was any malicious intent behind it at all. I don't think if you shot Casey Middlestat with true serum, he would have anything bad to say about Buffalo. Like, he grew up here. He's been, got a shot here. He's played really well here for the last couple of years, and now he gets to go to a good team. But, yeah, the skate one was interesting. Saw a lot of traction behind that, which I agree with. Like, not the best look, obviously, especially in a year where people maybe have questioned the coaching staff. Obviously not a great look. But at the same time, like, he's now in a Stanley Cup pedigree organization. Maybe a little bit tangent here, but I had more of an issue with Bowen Byram's first power play here in Buffalo, where he was trying to communicate and move people around, and no one was doing it. He looked utterly confused. Again, it just kind of all goes in together where, like, the coaching staff should be under serious evaluation, and I don't think any one of them should be safe, including the head coach.
Yeah, it's funny when you go from a team like Colorado that's a cup contender, and you go to Buffalo as a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 13 years, just a little bit different dynamic on how both organizations operate in that sense, I guess, is kind of what both players going into their new scenarios kind of took on in their first kind of reactions to being there.
Yeah, like I said, like if you're someone like me who's had questions about the coaching staff, the comments either one fueled the fire even more, or they kind of just reassured you on like, yeah, like I think that this coaching staff is questionable and should be under heavy scrutiny. If you're someone that thinks it was a shot at the fans, then that's probably just the way that you view the organization, right? Where everyone just thinks any former player takes a shot at them.
Yeah, and I wish Casey Middlestead all the best. I think he grew up here in Buffalo, played the World Juniors here, then was drafted by the Sabres, and he became quite the player here in Buffalo and really developed in the last couple of years, and I'm glad they gave him a solid tribute video as well, and I'm sure next year when he comes back with Colorado, that'll be a nice night for Casey Middlestead, and wish him all the best with Colorado. Definitely got a good shot there to win the Stanley Cup. So, Austin, before we get out of here, we're going to talk about this upcoming stretch for the Sabres beginning tonight against the Detroit Red Wings. We look at the NHL standings right now, and maybe a couple episodes ago we may have laughed at this idea that why are we even still looking at the standings, but as it stands right now at the time of recording this, the Sabres are they are 7 points back of the New York Islanders for that final playoff spot. This game against Detroit tonight is pivotal. It could be a 4-point swing because Detroit's one of the teams they're trying to chase down right now, who has kind of been struggling, and they're without their captain, Dylan Larkin. So with this upcoming stretch of games and with the way the Sabres have played as of late, that stinker against Nashville, like you mentioned, with Eric Comrie in net, and then with Tage Thompson and Casey Middlestead, both obviously out of the lineup, that really was just a trap game for the Sabres. And then the big win against Edmonton in the shootout where they won twice. So just general thoughts on what you're thinking here going into this key stretch starting tonight against Detroit, and then they've got the Islanders, Detroit again on Saturday, and then a couple of key games against some Western Conference opponents as they go on that Western Canadian plus Seattle road trip.
Yeah, so before they even get on the road here, like you just said, the two teams that they're chasing right now, Detroit and the Islanders, who are your next 3 games, 2 against Detroit, 1 against the Islanders. You find a way to win these 3, maybe we're back. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. But, man, if you ever had a shot to save your season, it's the next 3 games. I think 5 out of 6 points minimum, but realistically, you need to win all 3. Especially Detroit, you have a potential, you beat Detroit twice. They're at 72 points. You beat Detroit twice, you can get to 69. You're within 3 points, right? Like this. If you can turn the season around, it's this 3-game stretch where losses can't happen. So if this organization thinks they can take a run this week, before they even get to the Western road trip, this week is make or break. So it'll be interesting, right? This games of the season, I guess. Biggest games of the season, I don't think is an understatement. Again, I'm very skeptical. I've been skeptical all year, but at the same time, like, they're 6-3-1 in their last 10. Detroit's struggling, like you said. The Islanders, I know they're a playoff team. They're hot lately, but not necessarily the best team either. So to me, it's 3 winnable games, and if you win all 3, maybe you can suck us back in and maybe potentially have us believing in a late season playoff push.
And with trading one of their best forwards in Casey Middlestead, but like you mentioned, making the decor a lot better with a guy like Bowen Byram. And you also look at it, like they have to leapfrog 4 teams in order to get into a playoff spot here. I mean, Washington, the Devils, who we mentioned earlier, made the coaching change there. Detroit and the Islanders are technically tied with 72, but the Islanders have that extra game in hand. So you look at it and you say, if they lose all 3 of these games in regulation, you can basically put the nail in the coffin here of if there was any chance that they could sneak back into this thing this late into the season, those 3 head-to-head matchups against 2 of the teams you're trying to catch right now, like they need these games. And like you said, like 5 or 6 points at the minimum to get them back in this, because those aren't the only teams they're chasing. They have to also leapfrog those other teams as well. So like you mentioned, I think that we'll know where the Sabres are at if they're really going to have a chance here down the stretch before they hit that Western Canadian road trip in Seattle, or if it's basically just look ahead to next season.
Yeah, to me, it's they can't lose any of these games in regulation, and you can only lose one in overtime, period. Like, you have to win 2 and get a point in the third. Otherwise, the season's over. Because if you get 5 points, at least you're at 70. And then you're probably, 3, 4, maybe 5 points max back. So, like, you still have a shot here. But, yeah, it starts with you have to beat Detroit twice and steal a point minimum against Islanders. But realistically, you have to win all 3. You win all 3, you get to 71 points. Right now, Detroit and Islanders are at 72. So, yeah, it's pretty easy math. You have to win these games if you want the season to still be alive. I think the second you lose one game in regulation, season's over.
And like then you have to think about it too, because then you go out west, and then you'd think that even if they win these 3 games against the Islanders and Detroit twice, they've got 4 Western Conference opponents coming up here on the road, and it's one of those long road trips here that they're not even out of the woods yet if they win those 2 or 3 games against these teams, because you can easily go out west and lay an egg and not win any of the 4 games, and then you're really out of it at that point. So, like, where are you as far as the balance goes of out of these next 7 games that they're going to play? Which ones are the most significant? I know the ones against the East are the most significant, but you also don't want them to go out west and take one of the 4 games, because then they're just going to be right back to square one where we started before this conversation.
Oh, to me, it's no question it's the next 3, because the next 3 are the teams that you're chasing. So the Western road trip, yeah, it's important. You can't lay an egg out there, but if the Western road trip means nothing if you don't get results in these next 3. So to me, it's not even close. It's the next 3 games starting tonight.
And then look at the lines real quick as far as what's going on. You've mentioned Peyton Krebs gets the jump up to the 3rd line there. And, I mean, Eric Robinson has been getting a jump. Zembis Girgensons gets a jump. Whether they're going to stick by the time the game rolls around, we'll see. But, I mean, Jeff Skinner's on the 3rd line right now. They got Victor Olofsson as the 4th line right winger. Like, things are kind of all over the place right now with Casey Middlestat. Kyle Opozo moved out. So, realistically, like, what are you hoping that they kind of go with here moving forward, knowing that they kind of need to stack these lines the next 3 games, the 2 against Detroit and the 1 against the Islanders? Like, do you like the strategy by Granato, the fact that you got Skinner on the 3rd line and Peterka on the 3rd line? Girgensons is playing top line or just practicing with the top line, and Robinson 2nd line. So do you hope that things change by the time we hit game time tonight?
I don't know. I don't mind the Girgensons, Tuck, Thompson line. You give a, defensive responsible winger with those 2, and you can kind of match them up, which I think is what they did against McDavid in the Oilers game, right? They matched up the Girgensons line. It's a way to match your lines with a defensively responsible forward, but also get 2 of your better offensive players out there. Skinner deserves the demotion, in my opinion. He's obviously banged up a little bit, but he's not playing well. But also, it's the flip side, putting him with Krebs and Peterka. Nice little showcase for Krebs there. 2 guys who can finish, which is what a playmaking center needs. Robinson. Was Robinson with Cousins and Benson?
Yes.
Okay, nice. You got 3 aggressive forecheckers. Robinson, speed guy, can't really bring you that much, but he's really good on the forecheck. Benson's elite below the goal line, good against the boards. Cousins is that speed transition guy, so that could work there. Stranger things have happened. And then, I'm guessing the 4th line is Jost, Olofsson, Greenway.
Rusick, Jost,
Rusick, Greenway's still out, which makes sense.
But,
right? Like
but I do think he was back at practice today, so I'm not
so if
sure.
Greenway's playing, if Greenway's practicing yesterday, and if he's playing tonight, I'm guessing he'll probably slot in for Rusick, because I'm not sure what Rusek's recall was. If it was a standard recall or emergency, I don't know that for sure. But I would imagine it would be Jost, Greenway, and Olofsson, which again, 2 good 2-way players in Greenway and Jost, and then you give him a finisher like Olofsson. Like, it's throwing stuff at the wall, but at least I can kind of get behind the thinking on each line.
And as far as the D pairs, Dahlin with Byram, Power with Yoki Haru, and Bryson with Clifton. We talked about both Johnsons not being there anymore. It brings a different dynamic. Matthias Samuelsson's out for the season as well. So do you like Byram on his offhand with Dahlin on that first pair with Yoki Haru and Power on the second?
Yeah, I think that's a really good top 4. Byram and Dahlin have played really well together in their limited sample size so far. Byram has been really good. You can see he's just taken some pressure off Dahlin. Now, hopefully, the coach just lets that pair run and gun, because that's what that pair is good for. Power, Dahlin have, Power looks like Owen Power again. Everyone was complaining about him earlier in the year, but he looks very good. Unfortunately, got a goal taken away from him off a really bad call in the Edmonton game, but he's playing well. Bryson's playing really well, so I don't mind him and Clifton. I think the D pairs are as close to perfect as they can get, given what those 6 are.
And then the power play as well. You got Dahlin and Byram playing together with Cousins, Thompson, and Tuck up front, your 3 best forwards in that sense. How do you like the fact that they're actually using 2 defensemen on the first power play unit, which we haven't really seen all year? And although, they've kind of had to do some switching there with Dahlin and Byram, with one of them being offhand in that sense, and both of them can't take one-timers on that power play. Do you like that dynamic with those 2 and just keeping them together from their D pair and on the power play?
Yeah, absolutely love it. I know people complain the 2D, but realistically the 2D are Rasmus Dahlin and Bowen Byram, who are made for positionless hockey. So yeah, I think when you have Power, Dahlin, and Byram, those 3 are too good to not have all 3 on the power play. So whether Byram and Power was power play 2 or Byram and Dahlin is power play 1, I think it's a great move. Power play is producing a little bit better lately. I think Byram's just going to add a nice little dynamic to that top pair or top unit and make it a lot more dangerous, because if the power play gets going down the stretch, maybe this team can get hot again. I'm not optimistic, but you got to throw those out there, because don't want to call them, like extra forwards out there, but their play style is built for offensive hockey. So I have no issue with the 2 of them being out there together at the same time, especially with the man advantage.
And it was nice to see Byram get that goal and get some production from the back end that, other than Dahlin, they haven't been able to get on a consistent basis. So you're hoping Byram kind of gives them an injection of that as well and brings a little bit more offensive game that he wasn't really able to show in Colorado, playing behind a guy like Cale Makar. And obviously when you're playing behind a generational type defenseman, it's hard to kind of showcase the kind of offensive ability that you have. But this guy was a former fourth overall pick in this league. So I think he's very held in high regard, and I'm looking forward to seeing where he develops here with such a young D-core for this Sabres team that are all around the same age group, and they're all signed for many, many years here. So it'll be interesting to see how they do moving forward. Austin, final thoughts here. We talked about it. They're going to need to pick up a lot of points here from these Eastern Conference games upcoming this week. But what are you hoping for by the time we record in a couple of weeks?
Well, I hope they go out there starting tonight and they win the next 3 games to at least make the season interesting. And then, maybe we're talking about a 3-4 Canadian road trip after that, and maybe the season's not dead. But realistic scenario, season's going to end very shortly. And then we'll be talking about some long-term conversations, like if the coaching staff is right for this team, if the philosophy of the GM matches the style of the coaching staff, things like that, etc. So I would imagine the latter is probably what's going to be happening. But much like the Middlestat trade, usually when I predict, the opposite happens.
Yeah, maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised in that sense, and they're able to get themselves right back in it. Or kind of next episode, we'll be talking about outlook for the offseason, which we've talked about for the last 12 years for the Buffalo Sabres. But a good trade deadline for them. Could have done more, could have done a lot worse. So okay with what they were able to do there. And just kind of recapping what they did at the trade deadline and looking ahead to their upcoming games. It's a very important stretch here for the Buffalo Sabres. So thank you to everybody tuning into another episode of Sabres Semantics right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, proudly brought to you by J&L Flooring. Make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and smash that bell on the video version. And thank you to those listening today in on-demand audio. So for Austin Broad, my name is Brandon Caputo. Go Sabres, and we'll talk again very soon. You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.